Joining us for our speech coverage is Carl Gipson. He is the director of Washington's Policy Center for Small Business. Thanks for being here with us tonight, Carl.
Thanks for having me.
This is a big night, and the president does have his work cut out for him. You're the author of several books dealing with the small business community and the climate. One of the books, Lead the Way, Small Business and the Road to Recovery. You regularly speak to chambers of commerce and other civic groups about improving Washington's business climate. As we look toward tonight and the case that the president has to make, what do you see as being the biggest troubles that are facing the nation's economy and here regionally in the Northwest?
Well, it's all about jobs, and the president's definitely going to make that clear. I mean, we've lost over 8, 9, 10 million jobs over the last decade, really, and with the latest jobs report from August with a zero net job gain, which is the first time we've seen that happen in 70-plus years. We're not headed in the right direction. This is the third year in a row that the president's talked about recovery summer, which hasn't happened, so he's got a full plate tonight.
When we look at where the jobs picture is right now, the latest numbers that we had from August was 9.1% looking at July. Let's break down the regional numbers here across the Northwest. Washington sitting at 9%, Oregon 9.4%, Idaho 8.8%, and as we said, nationally 9.1%. You talk to some pundits, though, they say that the real number, when you look at the people who have basically given up on looking for a job, that number is in the teens or perhaps even 20%.
Yeah.
That's frightening.
It is, and that 9% number for Washington State has been there since March of 2009. So we're going on almost 2.5 years now where we've seen 9–10% unemployment. And you're right, the underemployed is the statistic you're talking about, and that's 17–18%. You start talking about the teen unemployment rate, you're talking about 20–25%, if not higher. So there's a lot of people out of work and the president needs to address that.
So what case does he make? We've seen some of the excerpts where the president's talking about $400 billion in tax cuts, talking about spending to help states keep teachers employed, talking about spending on infrastructure projects for roads. When we look at things like this, are those the kinds of things that can jumpstart the economy, in your opinion?
Well, you know, we've been here before. We tried this with the stimulus package, $870 billion, just a couple of years ago, and with limited success. I mean, there certainly was a little bit of job creation, but we're still in the doldrums. So I'm curious to hear the details from him tonight, because, like I said, we talked about infrastructure spending in the past. We've talked about, shovel-ready projects, which the White House then rescinded that kind of that thought process. So, where do we go from here? I'm very curious to see what he says, and the details of it are very important.
Interesting that 5 Republican members of Congress, including 2 senators and 3 representatives, plan on sitting the speech out tonight, essentially saying that we've been here before, we've heard what the president has to say in the past, and we don't think that this is going to provide any measure of improvement in the jobs market. What do you think of that?
Well, that's probably more political pandering as opposed to anything else. I wish that everybody would show up and debate this. Put the Republicans' job to put out their opposing view and what they want to go, where they want to go, and why, and to give the American people a clear distinction of what the Democrats want to do and what the president wants to do and what the Republicans want to do. So, I think it behooves the Republicans to show up and let them know, let the American people know what they're thinking.
We've heard already from some Republican lawmakers early in the day. One of them coming from Representative Joe Walsh of Illinois. Here's what he had to say.
This is his 5th joint session of Congress speech in 2.5 years. He's cheapening the whole notion of a joint session of Congress, which we used to reserve for big, huge, momentous occasions, heads of states from around the world. He's going to present his 3rd jobs plan to us, and that's a big deal. If he were serious, Jim DeMint had it right. We're tired of speeches. Roll up your sleeves, put something in writing, and present it to Congress without all the hoopla.
Before we came on the air today, we were talking about this, really how unprecedented something like this is, and you referred back to Jimmy Carter.
Yeah. Well, Carter did this in the late 70s, and actually with disastrous results. Maybe the president today will do a lot better than Carter.
Yeah. Let's take a look back to the House chamber right now, where President Barack Obama just entered the chamber to applause. We don't know how much applause we're going to hear tonight, though, certainly from Republican lawmakers. We don't expect that this is going to be like a State of the Union address that will be interrupted by applause frequently, at least knowing what we know about what the president plans to say tonight.
I agree. There's there's a lot of things that the president could say. We've only seen a smattering of details come out prior to this. I mean, it's interesting that they keep leading with tax cuts, $300 or $400 billion tax cuts. I know he's trying to get the Republicans on board, but I know that he has to also play to his political base. This may actually just be the real kicking off point of the 2012 election season. We'll see.
Well, we just had last night the first Republican presidential debate in which Rick Perry, the now front runner, it appears in the race, and that was the focus for them, talking about the economy and jobs, what the president has done. Newt Gingrich early on saying that, you know, we're not going to succumb to media attacks, we're not going to fight each other. Our number one job all here is to defeat Barack Obama. So it really seems that the stage has been set on both sides for this, really, is being sort of a referendum moving forward toward the presidency in 2012.
Well, you know, it kind of reminds me of 1992. It's the economy, stupid, right? You know, people are out of work. There's millions of people out of work. It's something that we can all relate to. You know, you start talking about other issues, not everybody can relate to it, but you can relate to somebody who, whether you've lost your job or somebody in your family or a close friend has lost a job, we can all relate to that. So therefore, it's going to get people's attention. That's why policymakers and politicians are focusing on this issue right now.
Since, you know, you said we've been here before with this idea of stimulus spending to try and get the economy moving, and at least what we know thus far about what the American Jobs Act is going to entail, how does he go about selling this to Republicans? Is there any way in your mind that you see that he can sell what amounts to more stimulus spending?
Not in the traditional way. I mean, he has to have the tax cuts in there, and I even think that isn't necessarily going to buy off a lot of the Republicans or all the Republicans, but he just needs to buy off a few or enough to get something through Congress. But you know, the EPA earlier this week talked about rescinding a very critical regulation that the business community was very happy to hear about. So there's going to be regulatory reform and tax reform.
Here he is, the President of the United States, in his address to a joint session of Congress. You see him just handed up the speeches that he will be delivering here right now.
Thank you.
Let's listen in.
Thank you. Hey. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America.
President Barack Obama unveiling the American Jobs Act before a joint session of Congress this evening. His speech lasting just about 30 minutes. We expected it to go about 50. At least that's how it penciled out on paper. But as we mentioned, speaking with Carl Gipson here from the Washington Policy Center earlier, that it wasn't going to be interrupted by as much applause as we might see during a typical State of the Union. There was applause from many Democrats on several of his points, and from Republicans on some others, but not what you would expect to see from the State of the Union.
No, I mean, this is very contentious times right now and a contentious issue, and I think people just were wanting to hear what the president had to say. You know, I'm glad he didn't go on for too long, because I think people were starting to check their watches to see what time the football game started. But you know, he fit a lot into 30 minutes, and we got a lot to talk about.
I want to go back to quickly here to one of the things early on in the speech, the president talking about some of the key points of his American Jobs Act. Here are some of the things that he says are going to be in it.
Pass this jobs bill. Pass this jobs bill, and starting tomorrow, small businesses will get a tax cut if they hire new workers or if they raise workers' wages. Pass this jobs bill, and all small business owners will also see their payroll taxes cut in half next year. If you have 50 employees making an average salary, that's an $80,000 tax cut. And all businesses will be able to continue writing off the investments they make in 2012.
Okay, here are some of the other key points. Tax breaks for hiring people who've been unemployed for 6 months or longer. Cuts in payroll taxes by 50% for 50 employees. That amounts to an $80,000 cut for an average salary. And 2012 investment write-offs for businesses as well. A couple of the others that I took note of, trying to work with federal housing agencies to help people refinance their homes, as well as trying to provide programs to put veterans back to work. Mm-hmm. That's a lot to try and digest, but give us your thoughts on that.
Well, 50% payroll tax cut, that was bigger than I expected. I think a lot of small business owners will be happy about that, but then again, I'm curious as to how long that's going to last. Is it only for the rest of 2011 and 2012? One of the problems we're seeing right now is small business owners and business owners in general, doesn't matter regardless of size, are nervous about the long-term aspects of the economy. So, a nice little bump for the next year and a half, 18 months sounds good, but that's not really getting at the structural problems.
Yeah. 7-page speech, really the first 2.5 pages outlined the plan, and then he spent the rest of it trying to sell it and explaining how he's going to pay for it. This is what the president said about paying for this plan.
The agreement we passed in July will cut government spending by about $1 trillion over the next 10 years. It also charges this Congress to come up with an additional $1.5 trillion in savings by Christmas. Tonight, I am asking you to increase that amount so that it covers the full cost of the American Jobs Act. And a week from Monday, I'll be releasing a more ambitious deficit plan, a plan that will not only cover the cost of this jobs bill, but stabilize our debt in the long run.
Okay, so we knew that they were going to have to make more cuts before Christmas, so the president's saying, make these cuts so that we can pay for this plan. How do you see this?
Again, it's pretty ambitious, and I give them accolades for that. But again, we saw it was just a month ago where Congress couldn't get its act together for a long time regarding the debt ceiling. Right. And now you have this super committee trying to figure out these cuts. By Christmas, that's pretty ambitious. I wish them well. I don't know if it's going to happen. Again, I'm glad the president brought that up because there's a lot of cuts that need to be made or savings that need to be achieved. How we go about doing that, I mean, every special interest is going to show up at that table or be knocking on the doors of the members of the super committee saying, don't cut them, don't cut my right. funding. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, Green Party, whatever, everyone's going to still want to have their funding for their pet project, and they're going to be fighting tooth and nail. I mean, Washington, D.C. has tens of thousands of lobbyists who are tasked with making sure that their clients' money doesn't dry up.
Yep, that's their job. Carl Gipson from the Washington Policy Center, thanks so much for being with us this afternoon. Of course, we have a lot more coming up for you tonight on the President's job speech. We'll update you every 15 and 45 with the latest reaction and hear more from our lawmakers around the region on Northwest News Evening Edition at 7 p.m.